Okay.
Waiting for the thumbs up.
I've got a thumbs up, yes.
Discussing all that.
All right, let's get going. We could, please. I'd like to call to order the meeting of Southern Hampshire Planning Commission Metropolitan Planning Organization for June 24, 2025. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Sylvia, you want to introduce the royal first, or do you want to wait?
Since you've kind of led that way,
Right.
I think let's go with that flow. So everybody, as we all know, we are losing our Linda this week. Wow, and she's going on for retirement. I was wondering if we'd see Barbara today. So
Just going, I'm here.
thank you for whoever has the secret card that of course Linda doesn't know about. If you could pass it over this way.
Aren't there two of them? Oh, wait. Oh,
Oh, my word.
I blew that too, didn't I?
Anyway, please pass it to Barbara. Thank you so much. Anyway, back to Aloyo and Linda. So this is Linda's last week, so we are going to wish her well. We have a giant chocolate cake, which is her favorite. And yeah, but we are welcoming Aloyo Yen, who is our wonderful new office and finance administrator. And please, when you're asking a question or you're, I will pass this on. This is a diagram of all the tables and all the people. Anyway, please let
See that paper after Linda marks it up with what people are like.
oh, and I forgot, I don't have Barbara on there, so of course you have to write, please put Barbara Griffin on there.
Highlight all the troubled children.
Yeah. Anyway, please start with saying who you are and the town, and then Aloyo will slowly but surely get to know you. Anyway, all right, yes.
Spelling ALOYO.
Yes.
Correct.
Thank you.
Exactly how it sounds, really, yeah. All right, well, why don't we start?
With that said, we'll look for action on the minutes.
Plus roll call?
Motion and then a roll
I'll
call.
move to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Motion second.
So let's try that again.
Motion.
Peter.
By Peter Capano.
Manchester.
And
Seconded by.
Ale Rose Deerfield. All right,
Roll
so
call.
roll call from Auburn. We have. What? Oh, I'm so sorry. Something echoing. Ed, can you mute yourself? I'll just do it for you.
There we go.
Okay.
All good.
Take control.
And we're not muted. We're good. Are we recording? Looks like it. All right. Sorry, everybody. All right. So from Auburn, Chris Sterndale.
Here.
Thank you. Bedford, we have our chair, Bill Jean,
Present and yes.
and virtually Dan Heath.
Present, yes.
Thanks, Dan. Also in the room, we have John Nelson and Mark Snyder.
Present and yes.
And no one from Candia today. From Chester, Andrew Haddock. Thank you, Andrew. And Deb Munson.
Present and yes.
Thanks, Deb. From Deerfield, we have in-house Fred McGarry
Present and yes.
and Errol Rhodes.
Present and yes.
From Derry, we have Jeff Moulton virtually.
Here and yes.
1 second, I see a newcomer. And anyone else from Derry popping in? I don't see that. Okay. No one from Francistown. I believe they're all excused. From Goffstown Online, we have Jacob LaFontaine.
Present and yes.
Thanks, Jacob. Londonderry in-house, we have Suzanne Brunel.
Yes.
You missed it.
Did you miss?
Again, Barbara.
Barbara Griffin.
From Goffstown, the famous Barbara Griffin.
Yes, and abstain.
Notice how I did not say infamous.
Made a mistake.
That was.
Thank you for being here. Okay, back to Londonderry. Let's see, in-house Suzanne Pennell and Deb Levens.
Present and yes.
And virtually, we have Brian Battaglia.
Present and abstain.
See any other newcomers? Okay, from Manchester, in-house, we have Peter Capano,
Present and yes.
and Ray Clement, Dan O'Neill,
Here and yes.
and Eliza Augusta. Thank you. From New Boston in-house, we have Ellen Campbell.
Yes.
Thank you, Ellen. And online from Ware, so glad to see you again, Danny Jean Stewart. Oh, you were muted, Danny.
Present and abstain.
Thanks for being here. Good to see you.
Happy to have made it.
Bet. From Wyndham in-house, we have Peter Griffin.
Here and yes.
And online, we have DJ Withy.
Present and abstain.
Thanks, DJ. And Ed Lapointe, also online. Did Ed not, Ed had to probably leave. No, I see Ed's name.
I think you might be having some audio issues.
Okay, we're gonna think that Ed, you have audio.
Present and abstain.
Thanks, Ed. And I'm hoping to see all of my Wyndham friends at the public meeting tonight for Route 111.
Yep.
Yeah. Excellent. Good, good. All right, let's see. Anyone from MPO? From DOT? I don't see it. Okay, but a non-voting member, I see Jack Wade from DES.
Good morning, all.
Good morning, and that's, let's see, who else? Oh, we also have Craig Tufts from Central New Hampshire Planning Commission.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Craig. Good to see you.
Thank you, Sylvia. On to new business. First order of business, fiscal year 25-28 TIP Amendment number 1. Nate, the action on this is to adopt the amendment.
Yeah, I have a presentation, but I think given how busy the agenda is, in the interest of time, I might just kind of not give the presentation. Unless you would like me to do so, I'll hit some highlights here. We walked through all of the projects in detail at last month's meeting. There were no changes from what we talked about last month. TIP amendment number 1 was in your packet, so you saw, the actual document of all of the proposed changes that we talked about last month. We held a 10-day public comment period. That public comment period closed on Friday of the 20th of June. No public comments were received, so pretty straightforward. Today is the public hearing. If there was anybody who wished to provide, any final comments for the MPO's consideration on Amendment 1, now would be the time to do so. If not, we would welcome a motion to approve and adopt Amendment number 1.
Oh, Mr. Chairman. Dan O'Neill, Manchester. Second. Earl. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
I see thumbs up on our folks online. Good. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Nate. Looks to have passed. Next up is Transportation Resilient Improvement Plan. This is an informational session from Suzanne.
Hey.
All right, I'm going to share my screen and I'll ask for SNHPC staff to tell us if that's visible and then whether it goes into full screen right now.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And let me go ahead and hide a few things. I want to leave one box up because I'd like Zach Swick to join for a part of this. He was unable to. Poor Zach isn't feeling the greatest, but he very bravely is joining us for today's meeting because he's going to tell us a little bit about some of the technical analysis that he and I have been working on. And let me go ahead and hide the floating meeting controls. All right. Okay, so everyone, thank you so much. I'm really excited today to talk to you a little bit about our Transportation Resilience Improvement Plan that's in development. I haven't spoken about it with this group as a whole for probably almost a year. And there's a lot of reasons for that, including a lot of shifting sands and kind of changing directives that have been happening at the federal level over the last 6 months. So what I'm hoping to do is kind of give you some insight right now on what is this plan, what is the work that we've done to date, and also talk about some of the updates that are happening in 2025 now that we have kind of a different perspective on how to approach this. Zach and I are going to give you a very high level overview of the draft plan that's in development and talk about some of the technical analysis and projects that we've identified for inclusion in this plan. And then we'll talk a little bit about next steps. So we'd like to move this forward to adoption, hopefully by the end of the summer. So first, I'd like to start out with a kind of vocabulary refresher, because a lot of us have heard the word resilience. We might all have a different understanding in our head of what it means. So I pulled up this definition that came from the Federal Highway Administration, and I've actually seen it used among a number of federal agencies. Resilience is the ability to anticipate, prepare for, and adapt to changing conditions, and also to withstand, respond to, and recover rapidly when there's a disruption. So I like to simplify it in my head is like, how do we help our communities, really address changes and even thrive when a major disruption happens, when major shifts are happening, whether it's due to climate change, natural hazards, et cetera. How do we survive and thrive? So what is a resilience improvement plan? And I figure everybody needs a little bit of a refresher on this since it's been a long time since we've talked about it. One thing that we're going to do for our region is call this a transportation resilience improvement plan. From kind of observing best practices happening around the country, a lot of communities make the choice to call this a TRIP instead of a RIP. I find it a much kind of friendlier acronym, like come take a trip with me versus rest in peace kind of thing. So the other thing that's helpful is that the state, New Hampshire DOT has just put out its own resilience improvement plan covering the whole state. They're calling it a RIP. So this helps us also differentiate. When we're talking about TRIP, it's the region. Often when we're talking about the RIP, we're talking about statewide information. So what are the basics here? So this is a planning opportunity that is authorized under the Federal Protect Program. So this is really an avenue to promote more resilient and cost-saving measures in our surface transportation system. Who can create these? Basically two bodies. It can either be created by a state DOT or an MPO, and that's us. This is a voluntary plan, so it is not required at all for anybody to do this. However, we really thought this is helpful for us. This is helpful for us to be forward thinking. SNHPC has already done a lot of work looking at our culverts, looking at the resiliency of our corridors. This is a natural next step that we're really ready to take, and that's why we decided to pursue it. We're thinking about this really systemically. So we're looking at the transportation network as a whole. We're looking at kind of short-term initiatives, longer-term projects. For those of you who are familiar with the vulnerability assessment that was done several years ago, or the roadway adaptation toolkit that came out, we've already put a lot of thought into kind of the needs of the region, and this is helping us solidify this kind of according to federal standards. This is a risk-based assessment. So we want to look at what are the transportation assets all around our region and how vulnerable might they be to natural disasters and specifically flooding. And here's an example. I really love the photography that comes out of the Nature Conservancy. They were a great partner who helped us on our roadway adaptation toolkit. And this really helps you visualize, like, we want to understand what's vulnerable and then what can we do to improve it? So this is just an example of a culvert improvement. You can see the before picture. That was probably not the proper sizing. There's probably really a propensity for flooding. They basically turned that into a small bridge in order to make that more resilient and able to withstand extreme precipitation events. And then there's also a carrot for completing one of these plans. So according to the Protect guidance, Protect funding actually can help us by completing a resilience improvement plan, or in our case, a TRIP. This can help us reduce the local cost share for projects that receive Protect funding. So that was one of the reasons people got really excited about this when I presented last time. Any project that's prioritized in a TRIP or RIP is eligible for a 7% reduction in local cost share. So rather than the 80-20, you get then are down to, what's it, like 93, 7 or something like that. You can get a 3% reduction if the RIP is incorporated into a long-range transportation plan. So you're looking at a 10% reduction in local cost share for projects that come under the TRIP. So what did we do in 2024? After we presented this last summer, we continued to learn a lot. The Federal Highway Administration hosted a bunch of different roundtables, peer exchange sessions. People were talking about like, well, how are you approaching this? How's your region looking at this? How can we streamline this work? How can we do this effectively and learn from each other? We also were really lucky enough to sit on a stakeholder group that helped guide New Hampshire DOT's statewide resilience improvement plan. So what we were able to do is learn from them. They actually enlisted a nationally known consulting firm, Cambridge Systematics. Cambridge Systematics has helped a number of different state DOTs develop their resilience improvement plans. They have their own process for doing the data analysis pretty effectively and pulling from lots of different data sources. And so we were able to kind of observe and understand what their approach was, which was really helpful. And we convened a group of regional TRIP champions to participate in a virtual work session. Many of you who were part of that group are in this room. I know that Eliza, Bill, Jeb Levins, other folks we kind of kept apprised. I think Dan, you were interested in, and I kind of kept you up to date on the conversation, and Andrew. So we had some really great insights from folks about, well, what are our resiliency priorities for our region? We looked at a couple of different things and talked about it as a group. We talked about, okay, what are our priority hazards? So we looked at flooding, extreme temperatures, severe winter storms, and high winds. And then we also talked about what are the assets that we care about that we think might be vulnerable to these disasters. And we covered everything from roads and stream crossings to also transit facilities, trails. Recognizing that in this inaugural trip, we might not be able to address everything, but we wanted to start to paint the picture of what are all the things we care about that might be vulnerable to these natural hazards. So we also kind of vetted a series of draft goals. So fundamentally, our goal for developing this plan was to understand the risks to our region's transportation network, to identify highly vulnerable transportation assets and services that we want to target for improvements that will make them more resilient. We wanted to build resilience into local and regional transportation planning processes. We don't want this to be a separate hard thing that we do independently of the transportation planning work that you all are doing on a regular basis. We want to try to find a way to integrate it. And we wanted to maximize the benefits of available federal funding. So these were all the goals that we set out for ourselves. And we had a great conversation, and Zach and I were feeling really excited to dig in on the analysis side. And then 2025 came around. We had a new federal administration. Definitely, we started to get a flurry of memos and executive orders and new directives for how to approach certain aspects of our work. And one thing that emerged during that early period was that the discretionary funding, the PROTECT funding, was put on pause. So this is a screen capture from grants.gov in early February. I know that New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services and DOT were collaborating on some PROTECT discretionary funds. We were kind of providing some insight on that. And then fundamentally, like a week or two before that proposal was due, the funding stream was put on hold for review. As of now, there have not been updates, but basically at this point in time, and we're getting in January, February, we're like, okay, let's just take a pause. We don't need to spin our wheels for something that might not manifest the way we're expecting. We don't know what kind of direction we're going to get from the federal government. We're going to take a wait and see approach, keep our eyes peeled to really understand what New Hampshire DOT is doing, and think about how we as an organization can take a streamlined approach to this work. So one of the things we were able to do, really pleased to say that DOT was well on their way to completing their resilience improvement plan and released this in the spring. So they worked with Cambridge Systematics, they had their whole process in order, and they were able to publish their data around flooding. Particularly helpful to us was that they were able to share their GIS maps. So we have all their GIS layers around flooding vulnerability, and Zach was able to kind of carve out, well, what does this mean for our region? And we were able to just kind of cut and paste and use that data to really understand what's happening for us. What does this mean in terms of our trip aspirations overall? So we really do want to narrow our field of analysis and just make the most of the data that we have at our fingertips. So rather than looking at every single possible hazard that might be a priority for our region, for now, we're going to keep the focus on flooding, right? We have great data from DOT. We have some really expert analysis in play, and we're going to make the most of that. Number two, rather than thinking about every asset, every kind of piece of the transportation network, including transit, we're going to focus on the assets that DOT analyzed. It just makes our work so much easier. So they analyzed 3 types of assets: road segments, bridges, and culverts. And then that, in our region, that means 3,800 road segments, 174 bridges, and 150 culverts. So that's still a lot of different assets for us to take a look at and learn from and assess vulnerability for. And so this is kind of our fundamental reframe. We're going to take New Hampshire DOT data. We are drafting and hopefully adopting a streamlined TRIP in anticipation that that protect funding will be reactivated. And I'll let you know that this is completely kind of anecdotal, but from talking to folks who work in the field of resiliency and sustainability, rumor has it that it will be re-upped. Like, we will get to see that reactivated. It might look a little different than what we expect or what it looked like back in 2024. So what we want to do is have a TRIP ready to go, and then we can always amend as needed based upon the protect guidance that emerges. So I want to stop right there in terms of this reframe of our approach. I know it's a shift, but I just want to see if there's any questions about how we're changing direction.
Any questions,
Sylvia, you might need to answer this, and I apologize, I didn't pay enough attention to the budget, but with this change in the programming, you said you thought by the end of the summer. Is the funding for this work that you're planning already in place, or is there a change coming next year? Is there funding we're not getting that you thought?
I'll answer it, and I'll let Nate and Sylvia correct if I'm wrong. So we're doing this under our UPWP plan, our work program. So the funding for this particular work actually does expire at the end of June. So I'm, working as quickly as I can to have a draft plan ready for review, but that still gives us time to get this reviewed by folks who need to take a look at it and make some minor updates. Okay. We just don't have the kind of bucket of planning and environmental linkages funds allocated for this upcoming UPWP because of the shifting of priorities that are happening. But we will have enough to have a draft plan done by the end of June, and then just go through a review process with folks. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Suzanne?
Yeah,
Virtual
Suzanne.
Yes,
Suzanne, did the DOT get this data from FEMA, or is this something they derive themselves?
It's multiple sources. So some of it is FEMA floodplain data. The reason why this is kind of exciting for us to be able to capture directly from GIS maps is that it also includes data that is kind of proprietary. There's some data called Aqueduct that's, I think, largely publicly available, and that has some great flooding resources. But it also includes data from New Hampshire DOT and DES that shows where have we had repeat failures. And where do we think that flooding has caused repeat failures? And they're kind of looking at their own in-house data sets. So it's a variety of different sources, but federal FEMA data is part of that.
All right, thanks.
Thanks for jumping in. I don't want to stop my screen share because it gets complicated. So if anybody else online wants to just pop up, you're welcome to. Okay, so let me just go ahead and jump ahead. I'll tell you a little bit about the draft plan that is well along in development, and it's definitely how do we reframe our approach and do this as clearly and quickly as we can so that we have something for you all to review. So chapter 1 is providing that big picture understanding of our approach. What we're doing is showing how we're meeting all of the stated protect requirements. And we're also showing how this work is going to integrate into our transportation planning efforts that are already in place. Chapter 2 is looking at inland flooding, which you might be happy to know and very not surprised to know that is our region's priority hazard. If you look across hazard mitigation plans and all of the other things that we have talked about prioritizing, flooding is far and away the most significant concern for communities in our region. We'll talk about the data analysis, and this is really kind of a reading and regurgitating in a really clear, concise way. Here's the complicated analysis process that the DOT went through, and here are the implications for our region. I'm not going to define all of these words right now. That'll be defined in the document, but I will note that the data that we found most useful for understanding needs for our region is the vulnerability data. So you'll see a lot of our decision-making around prioritizing projects centers around that vulnerability map, which was projecting what is the flooding situation going to look like in 2050, and how is that going to impact our transportation assets? That's where we want to focus on our resilience efforts. And then the regional priorities is chapter 4. That's the thing that everyone's excited to learn about. So we're going to have Zach talk us through that a little bit. What is our priority project list, right? What are the things that might be eligible for that reduced cost share? I will say, when we talk about priorities, this is, if it's included in the trip, it's a priority. We do not have to prioritize, which that's a relief. We don't have to go through a complicated scoring exercise and battle it out. If it's on the list, it counts as a priority. And then the last chapter talks about what's next. This is where we want to really reiterate, this is our, like, what our vision is for moving this forward. Should the funding become available? Should the kind of direction from the federal government shift in a way that allows us to capture more holistic understanding of hazards and transportation assets? We definitely want to be doing that. All right, Zach, can I turn it over to you and you can talk folks through how we created the priority project list?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sound good.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I apologize for not being there in person. Try to go through this quickly in consideration for the packed schedule we have today. Short to say, we did not create any new projects for this. We only went around and mined them from a number of different plans. That includes the 10-year, the TIP, the 10-year plan, the MTP, the state's RIP, as well as projects that have been submitted to the state, like TAP alternative projects or TIP priorities, or 10-year plan priorities, but have not actually been adopted yet, but exist as existing projects. Next slide, please. So we went through and we removed projects from those lists that are not focused on the assets under this analysis. So that, transit, debt service. We also removed projects not related to resilience, such as, signalization or paving. They might be good projects, but they're not necessarily high priorities. We also removed all the projects outside the SNHPC region. And you might be wondering, why would we have projects outside our region in some of our plans? It has to do with the Manchester UZA and certain requirements. I'm not going to get into it, but we just went ahead and said we don't actually have any control over these projects, so we're going to go ahead and pull them. Then there's not that many. So what happened was two things. One, any project that had to deal with drainage or stormwater automatically made it in, as well as any projects related to stream crossing, so any bridge or culvert projects. Next, we did an analysis where we looked within 200 feet of an asset and the state's vulnerability layers for 2050. And then we had to go through and do a quality control to remove false positives. The issue is most state data does not have a z-axis, so basically it's flat. It only knows x and y, and that can lead to false positives. For example, here is the Nazir Byron Bridge. And this is west of you guys now, go ahead into Pinardville. This was flagged as vulnerable to flooding. If we ever had a situation where this was actually vulnerable to flooding, we would have much bigger problems, standing, very high. So we're going to go ahead and pull that out and say that's not one of our actual priorities, because if it is, it's the end of the world and you're on your own.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah, sorry. So this is what it ends up looking like. Here is, the different projects or the different vulnerable segments within the region. And on the right there, you can see Londonderry 41593, which is safety and operational improvements at the intersection of New Hampshire 28 and 128. And there, so the project is there in blue, highlighted blue, and then the vulnerable roadway and culvert is both within 200 feet is there in red. So just that's end up what the final product looks like for selecting these.
Yeah. Sorry.
And so the project list itself is very simple. It has a project ID. It does, if one exists. For some of those ones that haven't been adopted yet, they don't actually have one. It shows the town or towns where it takes place. We also categorize it by the type of project, and then the scope as it comes to us. from DOT. And then we also wanted to highlight when a project was in New Hampshire RIP as well as our own.
All right. So in terms of next steps, Zach and I are hammering this out. We're gonna have the final draft done by our June 30th deadline. Hey. And then we'll be sharing it with folks for review. Specifically, in addition to having you all take a look at this and anyone else who you think from your community who might be interested in this, we're really open to comments and feedback. I also need to work with folks at Federal Highway Administration so they can go down their checklist to make sure that we're fulfilling all of our stated requirements. So that's gonna happen. We'll post in the next probably week or two, and I will send that out to y'all. Ideally, we'll get some great and timely feedback from Federal Highways, and we'll be able to adopt this by the end of the summer. And then once we have that in place, we'll just amend it as needed in accordance with whatever the updated protect guidance is, kind of like you just did for the tip. So we can do that as needed. All right, and that's all I have for you. A lot of moving parts, a lot changing, but I think we have a good plan for moving forward.
Thank you. Any questions, additional questions? House, online? All right. Thank you, Suzanne. Next up, Connections 2050. James, you're on deck. And it's MTP. Again, informational only for today, no action required.
Yes.
All right. Is that in full screen for online viewers?
Yep.
Thanks, Zach. So I'm here today to just give you a progress update on the Metropolitan Transportation Plan update. What we'll cover today is highlights. We'll highlight some of the project milestones. We'll share some of the planning process that's taking place today and talk about next steps. What is the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, or MTP? It's a long-term strategic framework for us to define vision and goals for our transportation system here in the region. We do this because it guides investment decisions. It ensures that we obtain federal funding. The MTP has to be in place as part of our overall transportation planning process. And it promotes good coordination between local partners, state agencies, and federal government. I will take a moment just to plug that we have a project, like a publicly accessible plain language project webpage called Connections 2050. And there's a URL here on the slide. And when we post this on our webpage, you can use that link to get to it. It's bit.ly/SNHPC 2050. So I encourage people to go check out the webpage. A lot of the things I reference in here, the documents are on that page. Eric.
How long has that been up on the site?
We started the project about a year ago, the update process, and that webpage has been up since around September. We actually use it as a launching point for engaging local stakeholders, our town planners and officials, and then subsequently conducted a public survey and used the webpage as a launching point for the public survey. Now, we thought this was easier than trying to do it on the SNHPC webpage, because then people would have to understand first what is SNHPC and then an MTP and why am I taking this survey. And the way that the survey was structured was much plainer language, easy to understand for somebody that knew nothing about the transportation planning process. And that approach paid off, actually. We had almost 500 people participate in the survey, so it was a good approach. Let's talk about that later, but you asked questions, so I jumped ahead a little. So to date, these are the milestones we've hit. We've put together a desk review of transportation plans at the local, regional, state level. We've conducted interviews of municipal stakeholders. That's your local town administrator or managers in smaller towns, your town, your director of planning, and if the town's a little larger, we met with engineering staff and in some instances, directors of public works. We put together a public survey, as I mentioned a moment ago, to asking people what their priorities were for transportation in the region. We've drafted existing conditions chapter, drafted goals and objectives, and drafted a system performance report. And I'll talk a little bit more about those as we go along. So the desk review, the big takeaway here, I won't read all this, but the big takeaway from all of this is that it's apparent that our region is reliant on private automobiles for people to get around. Probably nearly all of you here today arrived here in your own private car and will go about the rest of your tasks today in your own private car. And it's worth acknowledging that within this region, that is the default mode of transportation. One of the things we heard or saw in many of these reports is that there's a desire for addressing some needs around, especially aging demographics, where we're going to have, as a region, have a growing proportion of the population who are non-drivers. As I mentioned, we looked at local, regional, state plans. This just kind of lists some of the things we talked about. The local level, that's your master plans. At the regional level, we run something called a congestion management process, which identifies areas of congestion and strategies for mitigating that congestion. At the state level, the state has a long-range transportation plan, and you guys hear, ad nauseum about the 10-year plan. And so those things all guide our decision-making in the MTP. We reviewed a total of 22 plans, plus each of the town's master plans. And from that, we derived a variety of goals and objectives and measures that were related to transportation. And we cataloged all those to inform our drafting of goals and objectives for the MTP. Why do we do this? Well, as I just mentioned, we want to align our goals with the goals of our local communities in the state. We want to identify potential projects for inclusion in the MTP, and we wanted to know what questions to ask our local stakeholders. So that leads me to the next milestone that we undertook, and that's stakeholder interviews. For this, we identified transportation themes in the region, and we asked each of our stakeholders about them. And we reported, we documented those stakeholders identified transportation priorities. We asked them about preferred means for connecting with their local population. And we also, because we're in the midst of updating our regional comprehensive plan, we took this opportunity to also ask them about desired future outcomes for land use. Core themes we heard from that, again, reliance on the automobile. There's a significant shift in travel patterns post-COVID-19 with people working from home 1 or more days a week, and that changing the trip patterns, how people commute later in the day, earlier in the afternoon, with less peaks. And we also heard in nearly every community that the aging population was a significant concern because the towns weren't sure how they were going to be able to service their needs. Some other things we heard relative to the transportation landscape is that safety is a priority and that local control and identity of projects was a priority. These are things that were mentioned multiple times. Things we also heard a couple of different times were that rail and tourism did not have an access with local mobility needs. And that's somewhat, unsurprising, especially in the rural areas. And that emerging technologies have the potential to improve the region's transportation outcomes. And that took many different forms, people talking about new technologies that can reduce the cost of roadway preservation, people talking about electric vehicles, people talking about autonomous vehicles and trip services and delivery services, so a wide range of technologies. All right, so we got through those stakeholder interviews, we documented that. It's all on the Connections 2050 webpage, which I encourage you to check out and read. And then we use that to inform our public outreach survey. So the first thing we did, as I mentioned in response to Errol's question, was we created this Connections 2050 webpage with plain language about what is a regional, what is this long-range transportation planning exercise that we're doing. From there, we solicited participation in a survey, and we asked people to give us information about what their priorities were. What did we hear? Well, we heard that transportation choice was the #1 priority in the region. People want us to invest in more travel options, including shuttle services and active transportation, multimodal facilities, I should say. The second was housing and transportation, and the way the question was posed here is, our transportation decisions have a direct correlation to our land use impacts. So, if you build a road somewhere, that road will have driveways, and then the land around the road will be developed. And that depending on how you invest in transportation, can inform the kind of housing that you get. So we laid that out, and a majority of the survey respondents felt that this was a priority to address housing through transportation investments. And then the third was safety and efficiency. And that really comes down to make sure the roads are well maintained, the roads are free flowing, and that people are not getting hurt or dying on the roads. Just under 2/3 of respondents selected safety and efficiency as a transportation priority. But we also collected demographic data from survey respondents as an optional thing. And for the respondents that did give us demographic data, we saw that there was a somewhat, an increase in the priority of safety for respondents who identified as minorities. We thought that was notable. Next milestone, we drafted an existing conditions chapter. And that really looks at all the modes of transportation and also factors that inform transportation behavior, like housing and employment. One of the most important parts of documenting the existing condition is identifying where the roads are that we care about. We care about all the roads, but as part of a federally funded system, what are those roads and what are their shape and size? And so we include in the MTP a map of the functional classification of roads, which are not local roads. These are roads that really would fall under federal aid eligibility. We define trends in population, is the population increasing or decreasing? Is housing being built? Do jobs exist in the locality? And all those things together define travel patterns. We talked about this slide. One other thing I didn't mention is, one of the unique patterns, well, I wouldn't say it's unique. One of the patterns that we noticed that's very strong in the region is the proximity of commercial activity, retail strips, to highway exits, and really all kinds of jobs. And there is a tiny little map on the wall. Sorry for people online, but there's a tiny little map on the corkboard wall that Zach made that's got little yellow circles on it. And that is indicates all the places that are within, I think it's a 1 or 2 mile distance from a highway exit. And a large majority of the overall development in our region exists within 2 miles of a highway exit. It's something like 80 something percent. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but it is a staggering figure, and it is a pattern that significantly plays into the shape of our transportation network. We have other modes that are really important as well. The existing conditions chapter identifies where red lines exist. It talks about plans that have been crafted around the commuter rail service and the Capital Corridor. Describes MTA and the role MTA, CART, and other ridership services play in getting people to the places they need to get. It talks about community transportation. So that this is really, I'd say, you know, Sylvia is the champion of community transportation in our office, and Ben. And, you know, one notable fact about community transportation is that in 2023, over 15,000 trips were on-demand trips were provided to citizens within our region. And so that's, you know, you pick up the phone, you call and you say, I need to get to a medical appointment, or I need to go buy my groceries. And somebody's able to drive a car to the door of that person on the phone, or a bus or a shuttle bus. Yeah. One other thing I like to note, because I think it's a really important asset in our region, is Londonderry Exit 5 Park and Ride. There are 728 parking spaces there. And if you go there during, you know, let's say a busy air travel period of the year, it's not uncommon to see that parking lot hit full capacity, which speaks to greater demand for that kind of service and the facilities that support that service. That is bus rides to Boston. Existing conditions chapter talks about bike and pet facilities. We have many multi-use paths. We have a very, what I think is something that SNHPC does very well, which is we have over 50 bicycle and pedestrian volume counts that we collect across the region. So, you know, if you go and look at the other MPOs in the state, I think, you know, comparatively, we do an excellent job collecting and have been collecting historic data on how people use our active transportation facilities. And that's really important, because when you can put a number behind a facility like this, you can demonstrate its benefit and its value to the community as a way to get around without having to rely on a car. And then in addition to this, we also do a lot of activity around, I shouldn't say it's a lot, but we do activity around complete streets, which we're calling streets designed for all users, and transportation demand. So that's, you know, strategies we might use to limit peak travel demand. So car ride, car sharing, carpooling, staggered work shifts, work from home, things of that nature. We also talk about intermodal and freight. So we're very lucky here to have the Manchester-Boston Airport. So that is documented in the existing conditions chapter. And Dave in our office has done a fantastic job updating our documentation for freight facilities and freight need. And so we incorporate that into the MTP as well. All this leads to the next milestone here, which is goals and objectives. The goals and objectives are informed by a vision, which we've drawn from the Regional Comprehensive Plan. And the vision helps frame the desired outcome or condition that we want the region to have in the future. It's very broad-based, doesn't have a lot of detail. And then what happens is you go down the cone, you get more and more refined and detailed information. So from a vision, you can derive goals, and from goals, you can set a few objectives. And from all those things, you can track your performance through measures. And we do that here. We're actually required by the federal government to track measures for certain activities. Things like roadway and transit safety, the condition of our roads, whether our roads have a lot of traffic and congestion on them. And so we report those things out on a periodic basis to the MPO. And we also incorporate them into the goals and objectives of our MTP. And so I'll take a minute here and just rattle off 8 goals that exist in our MTP, draft goals as they're written in the MTP. And they all start with the same phrase: a transportation system that is safe and secure, efficient and reliable, supportive of the economy, flexible and offers choice, environmentally sound, land use smart, works for the public, and financially sustainable. Each one of these goals has between 3 and 5 objectives, and the objectives are really directional, setting a direction that we want to go in terms of achieving a goal. And so on this slide, I give the example of decrease transportation related fatalities and serious injuries. And that's something we measured. It's something we make progress towards and something we report out to the MPO. From there, you get into more fine-grained things. We talked about the measures. And with all that, we've covered the milestones of what's been completed thus far. And I just want to note before we wrap up that in the next few months, we'll be completing a travel demand forecast, which is a traffic model that will tell us where we may have capacity issues in our transportation network on federal aid roads. We'll be selecting projects, which is largely derived from the TIP process and from what has been identified from our local municipalities. Nate, who is the master of managing the transportation improvement plan and projects within it, will provide a financial analysis for the MTP, and then we'll get a draft report out for public comment by the fall. The MTP needs to be approved by December 31st, and we want to make sure that we leave ample time for public comment and to respond to those public comments. So we're targeting September to try to have a draft report ready for public comment. And with that, I'm wrapped up. And if anybody has questions, I'm happy to take them.
Any questions for James?
Okay, is every planning commission, regional planning commission doing this same type of study?
Not every commission in the state, but every MPO. So all the southern planning commissions, us, Nashua, Rockingham, and Stratford are MPOs, which is yeah.
Peter,
Would you define financial sustainable?
Yeah, so with the project list that we put together in the MTP, the federal government requires that it's financially constrained. And what that means is that the project list is fundable within our known revenues or projected revenues into the future. And so you can only have as many projects as you have funding sources to fund projects. And then you may have some illustrative projects outside of that, but there's an out year 2035 to 2050. And any projects that exist in that time frame need to have a way to pay for them.
Thank you.
all right, in the effort of time here, any other questions, please reach out to James. Thanks, James.
No problem.
Any other business come before the MPO?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
One quick announcement. You may all recall back in March, we adopted our regional project priorities for the 2027 to 2036 10-year plan. We sent those off to our colleagues at New Hampshire DOT. They have been busy compiling and doing the groundwork related to the development of the 10-year plan. Tomorrow afternoon, they will be having a kickoff meeting. It's sort of the beginning of the 10-year plan process for this cycle at the state level. They won't be releasing the 10-year plan tomorrow, but there is a public meeting with the Governor's Advisory Commission on Intermodal Transportation, or GASSET for short. GASSET is comprised of the 5 executive councils, plus the Commissioner of Transportation as a non-voting member. So GASSET will be kicking off the 10-year plan process tomorrow. I expect there won't be any public comments taken tomorrow. The draft 10-year plan won't be released until later in the summer. This will be an organizational meeting to bring there are 2 new executive counselors that haven't been through this process before. They'll be bringing them up to speed and setting some high level sort of guidance for the 10-year plan process. But I would note that it's at 2 o'clock. It is open to the public, so you're welcome to go and attend in the executive council chambers should you wish to do so. But it is notable that the 10-year plan process is kicking off at the state level, and there will be much more to come on that in July, August, and September as we head towards public hearings.
Thank you, Nate. Eliza.
Last time this happened, I think it was 2 years ago, there were no meetings in Manchester. Do you know if that's gonna change this time?
Each of the executive counselors determines where their public hearings will be held. So In our case, it will be Counselor Stephen, who determines where his public hearings will be held. He may or may not hold one in Manchester. Historically, there has been one in Manchester. It's sort of but 2 years ago there wasn't. So that will be entirely up to Counselor Stephen. Also, we do have, Derry is served by Counselor Janet Stevens, not to be confused with Counselor Stephen. And she has occasionally held a hearing in Derry in the past and may do so again. So we may have GASA hearings in our Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission region hosted by either Counselor Stephen or Counselor Stevens, depending on where they choose to schedule their hearings this cycle.
Great. Any other business needs to come before MPO? Not, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
That was Peter Griffin that it moved to adjourn. And second, Peter Capano.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? We are adjourned. Like to call to order the meeting of the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission for June 24th, 2025. We'll look for action on the minutes and roll call. Motion in the minutes. Anyone?
I'll move Deb Levens, Londonderry.
Second, Peter. Again, put second spot there. Roll call.
All right, I'm gonna make this quick. Auburn, Chris. Bedford, Bill.
Here, yes.
And Dan virtual.
Here, yes.
Thank you. John,
You're abstaining.
Mark. Did he leave? Yeah. I'm on Bedford. Go with me.
sorry. Yeah, yes.
Really quick.
Chester, Andrew,
Here and abstain.
Deb,
Here and yes.
Deerfield, Fred,
Here and yes.
Errol,
Yes.
Derry, virtually, Jeff.
Here and yes.
Thank you. You were ready. I love it. Goffstown, I got it this time. Barbara.
Here, same.
And online, Jacob.
Here and yes.
Thank you. Londonderry, in-house, Suzanne.
Here and abstain.
Deb.
Here, yes.
And online, Brian.
Here and abstain.
Good. Manchester, all in-house, Peter.
Here, yes.
Ray.
Here, yes.
Dan.
Here, yes.
Eliza. New Boston in-house, Ellen.
Yes.
Virtually from where? Danny Jean.
Here, abstain.
Thank you. Wyndham, we have Peter in-house.
Here and yes.
And online, DJ.
Here and abstain.
And Ed.
Yeah, here and abstain.
Thank you so much.
That it? Great. New business. We have intro to the Alzheimer's Association. We have Melissa Bernier.
Well, it just so happened, there's Melissa. Let's make sure Melissa has availability to do her thing. Let's see, 1 second. Where is it? Make co-host. There we go. You now can present, Melissa. So I happened to go to, I think, was it the State of the State? I think it was over at St. Anselm. And I sat in front of Melissa and introduced myself and we chatted. And because of all the work I've been doing on age-friendly communities and more recently the statewide community transportation needs assessment, I thought this was a great find for me to meet Melissa. And so I asked if she would present here to the commissioners a little bit about the Alzheimer's Association in New Hampshire and what they're about. So take it away, Melissa.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Can everybody see that title slide? The impact of Alzheimer's? Okay, great.
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much. So just to start off with, in New Hampshire, we have 26,000 people living with Alzheimer's disease specifically. That does not include other types of dementia. And approximately 30% of those folks with Alzheimer's disease in New Hampshire are living alone. So we're talking about a vulnerable population made even more vulnerable by the fact that they're living alone. So we're going to go through just quickly a little bit of disease information, and then we're going to get to what we do at the Alzheimer's Association. We do have an office in Bedford, New Hampshire, and we serve the entire state from that office. So the mission at the Alzheimer's Association is to, of course, at some point end Alzheimer's disease and all other types of dementia. We want to do that by accelerating and promoting global research, informing people about risk reduction and early detection and why that's so important, and maximizing quality care and support for people that are living with memory impairment and their family members and care providers. So dementia in of itself is not a complete diagnosis. It's a syndrome. It's a group of symptoms that tells us that there's something wrong in the brain. So what we encourage people to do is to try to tease out what type of dementia they themselves have or that their loved one has, because that's going to determine future care decisions, future treatment decisions, and so forth. So we have listed here several different types of dementia. There are many more than this, but Alzheimer's disease is by far the most common type of dementia. It accounts for over 60 to 70% of all dementias that get diagnosed. Behind that, we tend to see vascular dementia. And if you're not sure what vascular dementia is, it's a lack of oxygenated blood flow to the brain. A lot of times people get vascular dementia from a stroke or a series of mini strokes, and there's damage happening in the brain from that. And we'll go into why damage happens in the brain from Alzheimer's in the next slide. Lewy body dementia is a type of dementia where there's a substance that builds up in the brain, a protein that builds up in the brain that causes brain cell death. People with Lewy body dementia have a lot of delusions and hallucinations. They have trouble with their walking and their gait, and they're very sensitive to changes in their medication. Robin Williams the actor, died of that about 8 years ago. Frontotemporal dementia is a type of dementia that impacts the front lobe and the side lobe of the brain. People with frontotemporal dementia tend to be younger males, so 50s, in their 50s. And folks with frontotemporal dementia have sudden changes in mood and personality. They have a lot of uninhibited behavior. And right now, there's a subcategory of this that Bruce Willis has. He's having a lot of trouble with his verbal communication, which is called aphasia. And that kind of intense aphasia falls under the frontotemporal dementia kind of category. And there are many others. There's Huntington's disease, there's a Parkinsonian dementia, there's an alcohol-related dementia, so many, many others. And then unfortunately, sometimes people have more than one type of dementia. In my career, working with people for about 21 years with different types of dementia, most often I've seen that people have Alzheimer's and then unfortunately have a stroke or a mini stroke and are left with some vascular deficits, or the other way around. So having one dementia, unfortunately, doesn't guarantee you're not going to develop another type of dementia. So Alzheimer's is a progressive degenerative brain disease. It causes problems with memory, thinking, and behavior. Over time, symptoms grow worse, and that's because there is more and more damage happening in the brain. Many of you may have heard of, plaques and tangles, those two substances that build up in the brain and cause neurons to die. So over time, there's more plaques and tangles in the brain, which causes damage to neurons, aka there's less neurons. And on the outside, we're going to see people having functional decline. And what we really want to do is promote that risk reduction, talk about, have people learn about why early detection is so important, because if they can get diagnosed much earlier on, then they're going to have a better quality of life for longer, be able to make care decisions on their own, start treatments that are only available in the early part of the disease process. So there's a number of benefits. Of course, in the early stage, things are mild, but again, as things progress, we talk about, with families, we talk about, moving into kind of a middle stage and a more advanced stage at the end where someone needs total care. I also just wanted to highlight that there are populations that are at greater risk for developing Alzheimer's disease. Black Americans are twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's disease. The Hispanic or Latinx community is about 1.5 times as likely to develop Alzheimer's. And women are twice as likely to develop, not twice as likely. We are disproportionately impacted in 2 different ways. So about 2/3 of the 7 7.2 million Americans that are living with Alzheimer's are women, and women are also more often caregivers for other people with Alzheimer's disease or another type of dementia. So women are disproportionately impacted in a couple different ways. I'm sure many of you have heard of or seen information about the warning signs of Alzheimer's. Certainly by far, we know of short-term memory as the kind of typical first thing that we see when we're thinking of Alzheimer's disease. Specifically when it comes to memory loss, we're talking about short-term memories. So what you had for breakfast, how you got to the office today, versus long-term memories, which are things like the street you grew up on, or your wedding song, or your favorite pet's name or your favorite teacher's name in elementary school. We also see challenges in planning or solving problems. So that could be wayfinding, if there's construction going on down the street from your house, trying to figure out how to get around that so that you can get to the pharmacy. It could be following a recipe, which is a plan. If you think about it, you need certain ingredients, certain tools, and a certain process to get the result that you want. A difficult time completing familiar tasks. Most often I see that people start to have trouble using the stove or operating a motor vehicle, but plenty of other things as well. Lots of appliances around the house. Confusion with time or place. So the passing of time, how I got someplace, why I went there. We also see trouble with vision and spatial awareness, which of course is a big safety concern when I'm talking with families and they start talking about their loved one's vision problems. Then I start to think about home safety. Is the person still driving? There's so many cognitive functions that are required for operating a motor vehicle safely, that we really take that seriously when we're talking to families and come up with a plan for when it might be time to, what I like to call, retire from driving. So we also see trouble with communication, both verbally and in writing. We see plenty of people misplacing things and losing their ability to retrace your steps and find them. And we're not talking about like my bad habit of losing my cell phone all the time because I can retrace my steps and find it. But we're talking about folks that are losing important things like money, advanced directives, life insurance policies, things that are difficult to replace. We also see decreased or poor judgment. Unfortunately, financial fraud and exploitation and scams are so very common, and people with cognitive impairment can become a target for that. And so sometimes people will give out personal information or their bank account information and become the victim of some of those issues. We also see withdrawal from work or social activities. If you think about it, if you're having a hard time participating in, say you're part of a bridge club, if you're having a hard time remembering the names of people, that you've been playing with for years, or you're forgetting the rules, you may just stop going instead of continuing to go, and with the likelihood that they'll start to figure out that something's not right. And we also see changes in mood or personality. So it's not normal for someone's mood to be incredibly paranoid, incredibly depressed, or incredibly anxious. And so we want to make sure that we look at those mental health issues both separately and kind of in conjunction with dementia, because especially with depression in older adults is vastly underdiagnosed. And so we encourage people to get a clinician that can differentiate between depression, for instance, and dementia, and be able to treat both. So those are just really quickly the warning signs of Alzheimer's. Someone does not have to have all of these in order to have a clinical diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. They can have a couple that are significantly impacting their overall functioning and their overall independence. So I actually, when I'm doing an education program in the community, I actually give people a brochure that lists all of these, and I encourage them to go home, think about it, and circle anything that they're having trouble with, and actually bring the brochure to go, to their doctor's office, so that they can discuss it with their physician or their provider. Because as we know, doctor's appointments are so brief these days, and you have to wait quite a long time to get in to see a provider. So you want to make sure that you're capitalizing on the time that you have with them. So I kind of touched on this briefly, but the importance of getting an early getting an early diagnosis and paying attention for early detection. We want to pay attention to any changes that we're seeing in our functioning. This condition is an invisible condition, just like mental health issues. So I think that people tend to push some of these issues under the rug because they're not as noticeable as, say, a wound or a broken bone, but we do need to take them just as seriously. If you see changes that are unusual, that are impacting your overall independence and day-to-day functioning, that's the tipping point between normal aging and dementia. So let's face it, and I'll admit this, I walk into a room and forget why I went there, right? And I forget things at the grocery store sometimes. Those are normal things that, I lose things and retrace my steps and find them. So these are all things that we do on a regular basis. Those things occasionally that I do not impact my overall independence. What we get worried about is when people start to have some of those warning signs or those, red flags, and they start to have them more often, and more consistently to the point where it is impacting their overall functioning. So we definitely want people to run, not walk, to go see their provider, when they're having difficulty. And there are a number of benefits to early detection. You can plan for the future, as I mentioned before. There's different treatment options for people in the early part of the disease process. They can participate in research. And we always want to involve the person with dementia in those discussions and in the decision-making process. So briefly, when it comes to treatments for Alzheimer's disease, we don't currently have a medication or a treatment that can cure Alzheimer's disease, but there are treatments that change the disease progression. There are 2 FDA-approved infusion medications for people in the early part of the disease process that actually dissolve some of the plaques, some of that gunk that I mentioned earlier as part of Alzheimer's disease. So if the medications are dissolving some of that plaque, the plaque is not able to damage brain cells as much as it would have. And so we're able to maintain neurons. And if we maintain neurons, then we're maintaining quality of life and we're maintaining our functioning. And so that's why we say that it actually changes the course of the disease, because it's maintaining those neurons it's maintaining those neurons. There are drug and non-drug options for treatments, and we do educate family members about that and people living with the disease. We don't automatically just encourage people to go straight for medications. That might not be, for a lot of people, it isn't something that they want to try first. They want to try non-drug options. Everyone experiences Alzheimer's disease differently, and just like any other medication or treatment, it works differently for different people. Obviously, we encourage people to learn more about treatment options with their provider, and people can learn more by visiting our website. So, in general, what science says about brain health is that there are several risk factors for cognitive decline. The biggest risk factor is aging, and of course, we can't stop aging. As we age, our risk goes up for developing the disease. But there are things that we can do and things that we can control, lifestyle modifications that we can make to reduce our risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. And we want to encourage people to adopt those healthy habits. And what we also say is that what's good for the heart is good for the brain. So we know a lot about heart health and, making good choices for heart health, but now we know, that there's a direct link between what's good for our heart and what's good for the brain. And it's never too early to make some of those, lifestyle modifications. So these are some of those lifestyle modifications. I did send along a copy of the slides for people that would like them. So things like moving more, eating better, getting enough sleep, continued education, exercising our brain, sleep, smoking cessation, protecting our head, and many others. So just want to highlight what we do at the Alzheimer's Association. So I did mention that we have an office in Bedford, New Hampshire, and we serve the whole state from that office. We have a pretty small team. We have 3 full-time staff, and we have a group of volunteers that help us. My role, my background is as a licensed social worker. And so I work a lot with families. I do a lot of partnerships in the community, work with lots of different agencies to promote brain health, to support caregivers and patients and clients that they might be working with. But the most important thing that I want you to remember is our helpline that's listed here. The helpline is 24 hours a day, nights, weekends, and holidays, just like what it sounds like. And a person who reaches out to the helpline, whether it's on our website, through our website, there's a chat function through our website as well, or calling our toll-free 1-800 number, they will get an actual master's level clinician that can assist them. And when I say assist them, it can be anything from a local support group list all the way to those tough decisions, like when a person is having to move their loved one into an assisted living facility or into a nursing home, or we even, sometimes people call and it ends up being a protective service case. And we work with APS to provide a safe environment and a safe situation for the person that we're speaking with, or the family that we're speaking with. So it really runs the gamut. People can use us as little or as often as they need to. So when someone's making kind of a critical or a time-sensitive decision, sometimes we work with them a couple times in 1 week. And then maybe things stabilize and we don't hear from them for 6 to 9 months or longer. We do have a database where we can track how we're working with people so that the next time they reach out to us, we know what we've done to assist them in the past, so we're not starting all over again. If I didn't mention it already, see, I work for the right place if I forgot this piece of information, but everything we do is available at no charge. And that's really because we have the support of a lot of other individuals, a lot of agencies through our Walks to End Alzheimer's and our other revenue-driven events, so that we don't have to charge for anything, which is great because Alzheimer's disease is the #1 most expensive disease process in the United States. Just like what you're seeing now, we do a lot of education in the community. I do first responder trainings, law enforcement trainings at the police academy, trainings for caregivers so they have better strategies for caring for their loved one. And we also have education programs and workshops for people that are living with the disease so they can manage, create strategies, learn strategies rather, for managing their disease and so forth. We have support groups. We work with people to promote research. We don't have any particular research that we encourage people to participate in. We just have a part of our website that talks about the importance of research and how people can potentially get involved. So that, I think, is going to be the crux of what I'm going to talk about. I know that was very brief. I can definitely answer more questions after. I just mentioned that we have some events that help us allow for us to not have to charge for anything. So as an individual, we encourage people to share their story, help neighbors, get involved in research or clinical trials if that's something that they want to do, and sign up for one of our fundraising events. And our fundraising events are not just here to help us continue to do the work that we do, but they're huge awareness building events. We have an event in Merrimack every year. It used to be in Manchester, but now it's in Merrimack at the outlets, and we have 2,000 people there. And people just feel like they're not alone throughout the process. As an organization or a group, we have options for them. People can, of course, get involved with those fundraising events. They can host an education program. So thank you guys for having me for that, and share resources. And for you and the community, sharing information about our helpline. There's nothing, I guess I'll say that the worst thing that I hear, and that kind of hurts my heart, is that, I wish I had known about you sooner, Melissa, meaning the Alzheimer's Association. We're currently, and we have been for many years, we've been doing a lot of physicians outreach so that physicians, especially primary care providers, are sending people to us for support. when they need it, and everyone could benefit from more education and more support about their disease process. And we have a vast website. I encourage people to use our helpline if they are looking for something online and they can't find it. My information is readily available. And people can reach out to me directly as well. And our vision is a world without Alzheimer's disease and all other types of dementia. So just trying to think if I forgot. Oh, the one other thing I wanted to mention is that even though we're called the Alzheimer's Association, we actually work with people that have any type of dementia. So please keep that in mind if you have a family member, you bump into somebody, and they don't even have to have a diagnosis in order to reach out to us. I have plenty of people that say, oh, I'm 55 years old, my mom's getting older. Well, I don't have any concerns right now, but what should I pay attention to? Or a social worker from Mass General who says, I have a patient in Derry and, I need some support group information for them or some other resources. So what I like to say is that anybody with a brain is welcome to reach out to us. And it doesn't matter their age. And, we're available, like I said, 24 hours a day. So any questions? I'm just going to unshare my screen so that I can kind of see you guys a little bit better. Any questions about what we do at the Alzheimer's Association? I really, I jumped on when you guys were talking about transportation. I really think it's amazing how thoughtful your process is, because that is I don't want to say a complaint, but it's a challenge for older adults, especially those with memory impairment, and especially in those rural areas, getting to doctor's appointments, getting to their other places to get their basic needs met. So, just coming from a lay person that's not involved with your organization, I really appreciated hearing some of that. Hope it was okay that I heard some of that information. Yeah, are there any questions about dementia or the association?
Linda Moore O'Brien, Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission. I just want to say my dad suffered from Alzheimer's disease, and I called your helpline a couple of times, and they were always very helpful.
Oh, thank you for that feedback. We really appreciate it. Thank you. I'm glad you knew about us.
Thanks so
That's really
much,
important.
Melissa, for being here. And unfortunately, we're running short on time.
I know.
but
Yep. No problem.
And certainly invite everyone to contact you, or if we can always bring you back. So that's great. Thanks, everyone.
Melissa, awareness is important.
Thank you.
All right. On
And
to
for
our
anybody
next-
who's virtual, I just put my email in the chat, and of course, you have that as well. So thank you all for having me. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you. Second order of new business, the fiscal year 26 budget. Nate, we're looking for an adoption on this.
We are, and 5 minutes left. I can give a very quick overview potentially here. And hit a few high points. I won't be.
Amazing. Yeah.
Okay. In less than 5 minutes, I'm going to give you an overview of our draft fiscal year 2026 budget. I'd like to thank the Budget Committee and the Executive Committee for working with us as staff over the past couple of months to get this ready to be in front of you today. It was included a summary document of revenues and expenses in the budget for fiscal 26 was included in your packet. I will hit some high points here. Overall revenues up just over 2% year over year, even in a challenging revenue environment right now. We are entering new contract periods for our biggest contracts, our Unified Planning Work Program and our Section 5310 contracts. Those are actually both on the Governor and Council agenda tomorrow. So those are going to be in place, hopefully barring any unexpected surprises tomorrow. Those will be in place for July 1st as expected. We are losing our only source of state funding, unfortunately, in the new budget. $11,111 per year that we got for what's called the Targeted Block Grant Program. That was general technical assistance to our communities. Anytime a development impact would come in, anytime a community asked us to come and give training to their planning board or conservation commission or whatever the case may be. That was a flexible source of funding for us. Not a lot of funding at $11,000 per year, but important nonetheless. And unfortunately, that was removed from the pending state budget. So we will have no actual state funding supporting our budget in this fiscal 26. Other big picture items. Aloyo is here. Welcome, Aloyo. Aloyo has the title of Office and Finance Administrator. We used to have two separate positions, one that dealt primarily with financial items and one that was more office manager. So we're combining those into a single position with some bookkeeping functions coming under that. And then we have budgeted for a CPA, consulting CPA, to come in probably 2 days a month and do higher level financial oversight for us. But a lot of the day-to-day bookkeeping work will be under the new Office and Finance Administrator position. And that will help us create some efficiencies. Also, health insurance costs are going significantly up. Our health insurance premiums year over year are a 14% increase. But you'll see that we've managed those costs through largely in part through an opt-out incentive. So if our employees have the availability of coverage through a spouse or through their parents or through another source, we financially incentivize them to go on that coverage instead of ours. And anybody who goes on another source of coverage gets that opt-out incentive, but anybody who takes that opt-out incentive saves the commission money on health insurance premiums, even for the cheapest plan offering. So it's been a system that's worked fairly well. I am personally on my wife's insurance. So I do that personally. This is the 6th consecutive year that we have held our dues rate level. And so we adopted our fiscal 26 municipal dues back in September of 2024. We're holding those level. Only adjustment is a small adjustment to tie to the most current population estimates from the state. But we've got a couple of new contracts kicking off shortly. Road surface management system in Auburn, phase 2 of the Candia Housing Opportunity Grant. And we're also working right now with the town of Londonderry on their Housing Opportunity Program grant. I mentioned this before, that we are entering our new 2-year contract cycles for the UPWP Unified Planning Work Program and our 5310 contracts. We also have, we're working with New Hampshire DOT under their SMART grant right now. We're going to be kind of stewarding the Piscataquag River Management Plan process. And we have a new contract pending right now. It hasn't been a GNC yet, but I think it will be in July through New Hampshire DES to do stream crossing technical assistance for our communities. Other sources, we have a tenant downstairs, the Holy Cross Family Learning Center. This budget assumes level rent, and they will continue to be our tenant for the course of the following year. We also budget a small amount for interest revenue. I wish I could predict the future on interest rates. If I did, I'd be a wealthy person. I can't, but in all likelihood, the expectation is that there will be probably some rate reductions over the coming year. At least the Fed has given that indication. On the expense side, salary and benefit costs for our staff are our highest expense drivers. We have a COLA of 3.2% that is based on the New England region CPI for for the past year, along with a merit pool for existing employees based on performance. I mentioned the consolidation of the administrative and bookkeeping functions into a single position. I mentioned the health insurance drivers. There are small changes, you know, they look like big percentages, but they're small absolute dollar amounts of changes for short-term, long-term disability life insurance and PFML insurance based on the anticipated number of people that we will have with those coverages over the next year. We have some consulting expenses also that they're not just consulting expenses. For the 5310 program, the transit providers, we pass through a lot of those funds to the transit providers. So you see big expense items for Manchester Transit Authority, Easter Seals, Rockingham Nutrition, Meals on Wheels, now known as Meals on Wheels of Rockingham County, as well as caregivers. That is passed through from the 5310 program. We also have a Crederi Associates as our EPA Brownfields consultant, and a lot of our EPA Brownfields revenue gets passed through to consultants who actually under Crederi's under the Crederi umbrella do our phase 1 and phase 2 environmental site assessments. Few other things here, subscriptions for pretty much all software these days is under a subscription model, and those costs don't go down. They go up every year, the cost of software subscriptions. We're budgeting accordingly for that. We're in the process right now of doing an updated GASB 75 valuation for our audit, so we've budgeted accordingly for that. There are some building maintenance expenses that we do think are on the horizon, particularly soffit painting, and so we've accounted for that as well. Bottom line here, if you've read any of our audit reports over the last number of years, you'll see that the commission is in a very sound financial position. We have a strong fund balance, and we've been working with our executive committee to deploy some of that fund balance into reserve funds. We have 4 reserve funds right now. An operating reserve, what we call an infrastructure reserve, which is for the buildings and grounds as well as major building systems. An accrued benefit liability reserve for, you know, if people retire and things along those lines, they are due accrued benefits, as well as a vehicle replacement reserve. So bottom line is this is a balanced budget, and we feel, you know, good about where the commission is financially. We feel heading into fiscal 26, and we anticipate that fiscal 26 will be another successful year for us. And maybe I went a little more than 5 minutes.
You did.
Thank you, Nate. Any quick questions for Nate?
I have one, if I may. Mr. Chairman, Nate, you mentioned a little bit of accounting help. Is that the 29,000?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. That's exactly right.
And I would add, Mr. Chairman, I'm impressed with this budget. I think they did a very nice job.
Thank you. Any other questions? Not, we'll look for a motion to adopt the 26 budget. Earl, second. Liza. Chester. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Any opposition?
Thank you.
Thank you, Nate. Thank you. Any other business to come before Southern New Hampshire
Yes,
Commission?
before we hit that cake and celebrate Linda, we did not have a quorum at our executive committee meeting, so we're going to ask under other business that you all approve a contract between New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority and Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission. The executive committee did hear, and some folks who were a little early heard the presentation. It's an amount of $22,500. The bottom line is we're working with them to do a little work on ADUs, and James will be our project lead for that. So just need a motion to approve that contract.
Motion to approve.
That was Peter Griffin and Andrew Haddock from Chester, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right,
Any oppositions? Great,
so moved.
thank you.
So now, basically, we're done here with all our meeting, but I just want to say as executive director, and I swear I'm not going to start crying, We've been working together for the last 9 years for me. Others here have worked with Linda longer. And for me, for those who know the sitcom MASH, Linda is basically Radar O'Reilly. And she has anticipated my every move for the last 9 years. It's been such a pleasure. And so, yeah, I'm gonna have to stop there pretty soon. But I just want to thank Linda so much for making life so wonderful here at the commission. And I know you all feel probably very similar about her and her work, and she's just so cheerful all the time. I've thrown so many things at Linda, and it's very rare when you see her cranky. Although I think I've made that happen. But thank you so much, Linda, and I'm happy to dish out a lot of chocolate cake. So I invite anyone to say wonderful things about Linda.
To say nasty things.
No one will.
None to be said.
I will. I'll be happy to. Linda, when you came in, you followed a woman who was had the ship in turmoil. Let's put it that way.
Heard, yeah.
Yeah, and I remember distinctly, and it was remarkable how quickly things got back on an even keel, and we appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
You'll be missed, Linda.
I forgot, Peter's right.
Ah,
I was just private. That's the that, I think.
And then I shut on that. Linda had righted the ship by the time I get it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I've certainly enjoyed my 16 years here and 9 years with Sylvia and some other folks. And yeah, it's been a pleasure. I'm helping good people that I like, help communities do good things. And, I've enjoyed my time here, and I've got to know a lot of the commissioners over the years, and I've enjoyed that too. So I'm feel very fortunate that I'm able to retire at this juncture. And thanks to everybody.
Congrats.
Thank you.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
And if you haven't had a chance to sign the cards, they're right over here.
Time to cut the cake, Sylvia.
Let's cut some cake.
There are cards.
We're officially adjourned.
Somebody. I also